In the last episode of Vikings, we had some big character deaths, huge political upsets, and massive battles. But now that winter has arrived, characters return home to mourn their dead and wait for the snows to melt. Even the most ambitious and cruel characters like Oleg cannot overcome the barriers of the season. So this episode overall really felt like an end to a bunch of stories and arcs and momentum that the show had been building. But the consequences of what happened in those previous episodes are not over yet, not even close. If I had to sum it up, Vikings is basically telling us,
it's all in the beginning!
Now I want to begin by talking about the small scene we got with Harald and Olaf. In just this one scene, we get a good demonstration of how much the entire political situation has flipped on its head. Now Harald is the king and the ruler, and Olaf is the prisoner. This once overconfident and jovial man has been broken down and refuses to accept reality. I think we all enjoyed Harald's juvenile way of getting revenge upon Olaf by singing him out and clapping as he walked away as prisoner, a very nice parallel or mirror to what happened to him under Olaf's gentle care. I really like Harald as a character. I've enjoyed his scenes, he's been a great presence on the show, but they are definitely trying to make him seem as villainous as possible in these sequences. Like, Harald has the right of it when he says that no one likes to be forced to appoint a person. Bjorn was the establishment figure that everyone assumed would win, but also it's part of human nature to root for the underdog. However, sometimes a good judge of a person's character is how they behave when they have the right and the justification to be upset or to act out. If you bump into someone and spill their coffee, they have a right to be angry and yell at you because you did something wrong, but if they choose not to, that can show a lot about their character. And Harald is definitely not living up to that at all. Especially when Bjorn isn't that bad of a pick. He's not some tyrant or some authoritarian. He even designed his rule to share power around a lot. Also, the design for Harald is very interesting. I really like how he's constantly carrying around this big battle axe with this continuously fake smile plastered on his face. It all fits quite nicely into the picture of him being this ruthless politician now. Over in the Roos storyline, we got the closest thing we possibly could get with Oleg to a wholesome scene. Sure, Egor wants to cut the throat of the first pig, his wife wants to have a steaming hot bath in public. Okay, so wholesome wasn't quite the right word, but hey, Ivar just wants to walk again. Was that too much to ask? It's always really interesting to hear Oleg talk about religion, because he has this weird fascination in his heart for Odin and the Old Norse gods, though he was technically raised in a society that's very Christian. So like many of the Viking characters we've seen in the past, he's in this weird limbo land where he's not quite chosen any position or belief he wants to settle on. And then on top of that, when he goes into this philosophical rant about life and beginnings, he kind of signals that he believes in reincarnation too. And Ivar agrees with him, but because of very different context. So as Egor is fulfilling his resolution to go ice skating, Ivar is approached by a person who is sent from Oleg's brother, saying he's safe and in waiting. But the more interesting part is when Egor approaches afterwards and asks who he was. And when he finds out Prince Stur is willing to help them and is just waiting for the right time, he calls him an angel sent from God. This shows us how much more Egor has kind of advanced in his ambition and realizing the dream that Ivar kind of spun to him over this time to take out Oleg and press his claim to Roos. Now, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I'm getting really weird vibes from Egor for quite some time now. He's got this really sadistic and cruel side to him that he's probably kind of picked up from Oleg. And now that I think about it, Ivar's not very much of a good influence either. He is a pretty sadistic person himself. Overall, in the Roos storyline, we didn't get that much, but I did really enjoy that scene where they had all these guardsmen out in the open, freezing their butts off, their beards frozen in ice, while this Freydis clone is just chilling in this really hot spa, constantly filled up by servants. Just another reflection of the playful, absurd side of Oleg. Now, quite interesting, when we follow Vikser in this episode, he's still very wrapped up in his guilt over Lagertha. He seems so unsure of why he did what he did. He knows it's really bad and that people around him will hate him for it, but doesn't have the mental faculties to really hide it from them. Characters like Uber know that Lagertha was supposed to be killed by a son of Ragnar, and at the very same time, he's acting as shady as hell. But come on, a boy just wants to sleep. If you're interested in what could be possibly happening in the future with Vikser, there's some pretty interesting discussion over on my preview breakdown, so you can check that out here if that's something you think you'll enjoy. The one thing that Vikser does have going for him is that when Uber talks to the vision and memory of the seer, he says that Ivar killed Lagertha. He leaves his crypto room kind of describing the fact that it was Ivar's presence and illusion that drawed Vikser to stabbing her, but of course Uber doesn't know that context, so as always the seer is very unhelpful. But at least we finally get a resolution on the theory that's been brewing for a while, that the thing that the CS said Vikserk would achieve that no one else would, was killing Lagertha. Ivar tried with all his might, he even overthrew a kingdom to try and take her life, but he couldn't. Uber tried to challenge and kill her, but he couldn't. In the end, it was Vikserk. But at this point in the story, Uber's not going to thank him for that whatsoever. However, his brother Ivar might actually be really happy with the fact that Vikserk finally avenged his mother, someone Ivar cared for more than anyone else in this world. Now of course, all that was interesting, but the bulk of this episode was put towards one purpose: Lagertha's funeral. Through all the political turmoil and ups and downs, Lagertha has been a really stabilizing and a consistent figure for the people of Kattegat, so finding her alone and dead in the streets really rattles everyone. Lagertha has been a rock in Torvi's life, an inspiration to showmaidens like Gunhild, and a loving mother to Bjorn. She's been there right from the beginning at Ragnar's side, but had her own story just as strong as well. I think Omar's words put it best. This was one of the most emotional episodes in the entire show. The cinematography, directing, and the music was simply amazing. One of my favourite parts about Vikings is when they go really deep into the rich culture and the outlandish and almost alien traditions of the Viking people. Simply from the colours and the costumes and the tone, we get so much emotion already. Vikings nailed down the spiritual, almost surreal feeling that the characters were immersed in. One-off side characters like the Angel of Death and the girl that gets sacrificed pull off their roles superbly. The imagery of the dead horse heads and the blood on the boat and the breaking of the ice with the arrows, everything was done so well. And we haven't even got to the emotional and powerful speeches from the characters, especially Bjorn. We hear these trumpets and music building up from the background as Bjorn pours out his heart, his emotion and grief. We cross between his face full of pain and these images of Lagertha burning up. And then as Lagertha's boat is dragged away and she heads out on her last voyage, the sun rises behind the characters, as the winter breaks and the spring emerges. So the fates of characters like Vikserk and Ivar and Bjorn are unlocked, for life must go on. Now my favourite shot of the entire sequence has to be when the small girl runs forward on the ice and looks down and sees the floating form of Lagertha resting at the side of Ragnar. The supernatural nature of the show is always done when it's left in this vague grey area where realistically this small child with a developing brain could be seeing weird lights and distortions from the ice, and her brain just puts it together as the image of Lagertha. Or this ice can be seen as this thin barrier between the realms of the living and the dead. We, the viewer, can interpret how much of what we see is reality and existence, and how much of it is just the character's perceptions. But either way, I found it beautiful and it was interesting and really emotional, and a really good send-off to Lagertha as a character. I'd love to hear all of your guys' interesting thoughts about the episode as a whole, Lagertha's storyline, how you thought the send-off was. Also, if you enjoyed this video, it'd be awesome if you could smash that like button, and if you're not subscribed, it's the perfect time to join. There's always room for one more. Skål.